correctly with the correct amount of...
Are you hearing bumps in the night? Seeing mysterious lights in the sky? Are there mysterious red eyes watching you from the shadows? Did you find a strange, oversized footprint? Do you believe in cryptids and the paranormal? Are you afraid of the dark? No? Well, you should be. It's time for Carolina Creepers and Oddities Radio, the bi-weekly podcast that is dedicated to bringing you the legends and stories of paranormal events that occurred in and around North and South Carolina. So pour yourself a drink, dim the lights, sit back, and enjoy the show. Welcome to Carolina Creepers and Oddities Radio. My name is Chris Edwards, and this is my co-host, Jay Gallagher.
Good evening, everybody.
And in this edition, we'll explore the legend of the ghost Hound of Goshen. But before we dive right in, let's meet our host. So, Jay, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a retired firefighter paramedic. I'm your basic family man. My wife says I'm a grumpy old man, but I don't believe what she says half the time anyway. I live here in central North Carolina, and I've had a lot of different interests since I've retired from the fire department. And this is probably the biggest one. How about you, Chris? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, like you, I'm a firefighter EMT and haven't gotten to paramedic yet, but I am a firefighter EMT living in the northern part of South Carolina, like right near Charlotte, North Carolina, is where I'm at, but you know that. And Jay, how did you become interested in paranormal phenomenon?
Well, somehow, shape, form, or fashion, I've always, except for one house, I've always lived in a haunted house. When I was little, we lived in a haunted house, and the woman that haunted it, name was Miss Sally. And the quick ghost story, I guess you would say, about Miss Sally is she had her boyfriend went off to fight in the Civil War, and he didn't make it, unfortunately. He got killed, and she couldn't bear the thoughts of living without him, so she hung herself from the upstairs banister rail, upstairs. And we would hear footsteps at night, the typical boards creaking and whatnot, but the lights would either come on when you wasn't inspecting it. You could get up to go over to the switch to turn the lights out, and the switch would be in the off position. And you could say, "Miss Sally, would you please turn the lights out?" And the lights would go out. And the same thing in reverse. The lights would be on, and they would go out. "Miss Sally, would you please turn the lights back on?" And the lights would come on. It wasn't a 2 or 3 minute delay in between. It was immediate response when you ask her to either turn the lights back on or turn them off. She never done any harm to us. Just the footsteps and the lights. And once in a while, you would get the aroma of fresh baked bread, and nobody be in the kitchen doing anything, and nobody in my house except for my great grandma knew how to bake bread like that. And at that point, she was so far up in age that she couldn't do much in the kitchen, except stand back and supervise. And as I got older, we moved to Eli Whitney, which is a small community in the southern part of Alamance County. And almost immediately, we're hearing footsteps upstairs. No electrical phenomena, I guess you would say. And we found out that the woman that we bought the house from, her husband had passed away in the house.
Oh wow, you never told me that.
Yeah, he had a massive heart attack, from what I could gather, and he didn't make it. And 2 years maybe after we moved into that house, my uncle passed away. Now myself and my dad, God rest his soul, very interested in the Civil War. And my dad had a whole bunch of relics and books and everything. He basically turned the upstairs of that house into a museum, as you well know. And not long after my uncle died, who was also interested in the Civil War, the footsteps upstairs increased. Instead of a, like once a month thing, it was every day. And it happened almost immediately after Uncle Keith passed away. So we contributed that to Uncle Keith's spirit being upstairs in what my dad called the Civil War room.
Right. Now, I remember one day I was visiting you, and y'all had gone to the store. I was sitting there by myself, and there was just this horrendous crash upstairs, and I knew nobody was home, and that was just like freaky.
Yeah. A lot of weird things took place after Uncle Keith passed away. And my uncle on my mama's side, who was living with us when he passed away, he was a musician. He played bluegrass music, and he played the banjo. Well, one of my granddads on my mom's side, one of his banjos was upstairs and in the Civil War room also. And not long after he passed away, you could go up there and you could just barely hear it, but it was like somebody over there plunking on that banjo. So we contributed that to Uncle Larry. So
Right.
and basically having a whole lifetime of paranormal experiences is basically what really kicked my interest in the high gear of it. And I've been, kind of studying it and researching it and whatnot ever since.
Gotcha. So, as for me, my interest really peaked when I was in middle school and we took a trip to Gettysburg. I don't remember exactly what grade I was in, but there were all the stories of the ghost on the battlefield and different things that we saw when we were there. And that's where it kind of started. And then, like you, I've seen some strange things over the years. Different houses I've been into just had some really uneasy energy. My wife's parents' house in Burlington, the downstairs was like that for the longest time. You go down there and just get this really weird feeling of just like dread and just weird, really weak. When I'm sitting down there on the computer, I'd just feel really weak. I'd get up and go upstairs and it would be fine. And so, yeah, I've been exposed to some pretty strange things as well.
Yeah. Well, if you remember when we all went to Gettysburg last year, my youngest son, he was up there taking pictures and he called a few things on that we can't explain. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Yeah, he had that app on his phone and he was playing around with it, and there was like a image sitting right beside him in the van. Do you believe in ghosts? No? Well, you might just change your mind if you're driving through Sumpter National Forest. You might just encounter the legendary ghost Hound of Goshen Hill on this barren road in South Carolina. Whether this is an actual fact-based legend or just stories, the ghost hound is a formidable presence you just don't want to even chance to encounter along this lonely 5-mile stretch of road that runs through one of the thickest parts of Sumpter National Forest. This is a story that has been told for decades in South Carolina involving the ghost of a hound dog that chases people, cars, or anything that it encounters along the 5-mile stretch of Old Buncombe Road as it runs through parts of Union County in South Carolina. But don't confuse this stretch of highway with the Old Buncombe Road found near Greenville. This particular Old Buncombe Road runs between US 176 and the unincorporated community of Cross Keys in Union County. Here, even this short stretch of road that traverses the Sumpter National Forest makes you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. The story goes like this. Our story originates in the 1840s. The ghost town only appears on foggy nights. The place is always along a stretch of the old state road leading from Mabington community of Newberry County into the Goshen Hill community of Union. Even in the sunny summer, this lonesome, heavily wooded and abandoned area has a haunted aura. It is smart not to drive there alone at night. It is here where the ghost hound of Goshen Hill is said to stalk its prey, driven by his anger, disappointment, and fuels his rage and fury as he chases down anyone who crosses paths with him. No reports of it ever having caught anyone have surfaced. Does that just mean that no one has gotten away to tell the story? Maybe so, maybe not. When very dangerous ghosts are involved, it's quite easy to let your imagination wander to the worst case scenario. Our legend starts with a peddler who came to Mabington selling tinware. Accompanying him was a large white mastiff dog, his faithful friend on his lonely journeys. A murder was committed around the time the peddler appeared. Being the only stranger in the area, the peddler was then charged, found guilty of the murder. After the trial, the man was then hung near a cemetery and church on this highway and was then buried near, but not in, the cemetery proper. While the man was jailed, awaiting his execution, the big white dog just laid outside with his head on his paws. The dog was silent with only the occasional whimper. As he witnessed the execution that night, the most mournful cries of the dog's broken heart haunted the night. After about a week of this, the area residents stated that they could not sleep. Rightfully so, because the sound was also the screaming of their own guilty consciences. The real murderer confessed. They had hung an innocent man. The cries, along with the remembrance of a terrible wrong, were too much for the community to tolerate, so they killed the dog with a rifle shot. The howls ceased, and the people thought life had returned to normal. That was until 3 months later when the cries began again. The next night, the hangman was riding along the old state road when out of the fog a white dog appeared. The rider nudged his horse to speed him home and drew blood with his spurs, but the dog matched the same speed from the edge of the road until it disappeared into the black fog when the house light appeared. Over the next decade, this happened to others as well, when the phantom dog became more brazen in his appearances. Dr. James Cofield of Goshen Hill encountered the dog coming home from visiting a patient on a foggy late night. The doctor was convinced that the dog went under and around his terrified horse's feet, and his riding crop passed through the dog's body. The dog then jumped up on the horse and rode with Dr. Cofield, at times behind him and sometimes in front. The doctor stated that the dog's eyes burned like red fire coals, and his battered muzzle bore what Dr. Cofield described as a hideous grin. The encounter ended when the lights of the doctor's house appeared out from the darkness and gloom. In the 19th century, after several more appearances, the dog's hideous grin earned him the name Happy Dog, and that's what the community still calls him today. 20th century sightings were numerous. Only one resulted in bodily harm when a young man walking home on this part of the road was chased by the ghost hound. The man ran until he came to the nearest home, falling down on the doorstep. His neck showed what looked like teeth marks. He was bloody and his clothes were tattered. Skeptics stated that he had probably run through barbed wire in his frantic flight, but they did admit that in the distance they heard the most terrible howls. The ghost dog hasn't given up his haunt in the age of automobiles. The most recent incident involved the driver of a Toyota truck. She was driving home about midnight when she heard a blood-curdling cry that signals Happy Dog's appearance. The dog followed her from the side of the road, and no matter how fast she drove, he would match her speed. Once Happy Dog jumped on the truck's hood and faced her through the windshield, she skidded off the road. By her account, the dog's red eyes spun like pinwheels, and she was still haunted by his terrible smile. Lots of signs in and around Mapleton today read, "Beware of the dog." While these may be of the generic sort, area folks read them with deeper appreciation. The latest sighting, as recently as 1970, there was an old lady who said that the white dog had appeared at the edge of her property, first looking as if it was normal size, but then inexplicably growing to enormous dimensions before leaping at her and causing her to faint, after which she would awake to find that it was nowhere to be seen. There were also other sightings. Reports gathered by paranormal investigator Tina R. McSwain through interviews with area residents. McSwain writes, and this is a quote, "One man said he had seen it several times. The time was always late, around 1 a.m. or later. He described it as a big white dog, pure white, that floated above the ground but moved very fast. He said it had one big red bloodshot eye. Said his mother had seen it, but she was dead now. A lady told us her mother had seen it too, and was so frightened that she would no longer drive down that road at night. This lady also told us she had been chased by the dog when she was a little girl, but did not really want to talk about the experience. She did, however, tell us that how to get to the church and road. She told us to go ahead if we were brave enough to go hunting for it." Another local account of the ghost hound was recorded by Roger McReadle at the now defunct website Capital at Play, who says that his father claimed to have seen it when he was younger and lived just around the corner from the old Ebenezer Church, which is the cemetery where the peddler was buried. According to the father, at the time, one of the family's cows had gone missing, so he had gotten on a pony and ridden out to the road to go search for it. This is when he would have a brush with the nefarious ghost hound, and he says, and again another quote, "This was in the fall of the year, and the sun was about to set. I didn't like being down there with it getting dark, but your grandma would have skint me if I had left a cow out. So I rode on down to where our fence bordered the road and started looking at the barbed wire fence we had down there. I heard it before I saw it, something behind me running fast along the road. I turned, and the biggest, meanest looking dog I ever saw was running straight at us. There was nothing between us but that barbed wire fence. The dog didn't bark, howl, or make a sound except for his feet running, and his eyes. I was scared to death, and the pony, well, he bucked and threw me slam into that barbed wire fence, and I took off. When I picked myself up, the dog was gone, just gone. But I took off running, and I didn't stop till I was at the house. I was hollering at the top of my lungs. I must have scared Mama, 'cause she didn't say a word about me having lost a cow or my horse both. I've been so scared, I hadn't even noticed that I was cut pretty bad from the barbed wire. She cleaned me up and bandaged me. I slept with my light on in my room that night. The horse and the cow came home by themselves in the morning. We had a telephone by then. Mama called everybody in the neighborhood, but nobody owned a big white dog. But she did tell me that it was okay if I wanted to start bringing the cows up earlier in the afternoon. I don't know if she believed what I'd seen, but she knew I believed it. So Jay, this specter only appears on foggy nights. In your opinion, is it truly the ghost hound, or is it a fog playing tricks on your eyes?
Well, I'm going to say it's a 50-50 shot. I've been riding down foggy roads and thought I'd seen things in the mist that it was either there or wasn't there. And to be honest with you, I didn't want to turn around and go find out. I'm leaning more towards the fact that it is a possibility that it is the ghost hound, because there's been recent sightings that's been reported, and not just a few sightings and then the legend disappears. How about you? What are your thoughts?
Good question. I would probably go with fog myself on this particular case.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna go with the fog, huh?
I'll go with the fog, yeah.
Okay.
And why do you think there wasn't a proper investigation done on the peddler along with a proper trial?
Well, it was in the 1840s, and forensics hadn't come into play like they are today for sure. And, the stranger in town would be, my first guess, or first person to look at. But why they didn't follow through, I couldn't tell you. And the possibility of, the sheriff convincing everybody that this was the guy, and kind of a swayed jury, so to speak, towards killing, finding the killer. That could have been a possibility. How about you? What do you think was the reasoning?
Well, I agree with you 100% on that fact. I think, it was the early 19th century, the late 1800s. Like you said, he was the stranger in town. Nobody knew him. And it was a kangaroo court. I mean, look,
Yep.
it's the same situation as Salem witch trials. Really, if you look at it. Um, but the fact that he was a stranger in town made it, made him an easy scapegoat. And that's kind of what I think happened as far as that goes.
And wrong place, wrong time.
Right. Now, how do you think the townspeople felt when the actual real killer admitted to it, and they figured out they hung an innocent man?
Oh wow. Shame. I would hope they would feel shame. Uh, that laid on their conscience for till the day they died, especially if you were on that jury. I know it wouldn't me anyway.
Yeah.
And
And to go along with that, here's another question that wasn't on our sheet, but uh, what? I lost my train of thought.
it's okay, it happens. Wait until you get my age, and it happens even more.
Anyway, so the next question was, you had actually posted this question. Why do you think no one took care of the dog rather than shooting it?
Well, personally, I think that maybe. Have you ever seen a mastiff?
Yeah, big dog.
They're very big dogs, and they're very intimidating. But in the same respect, I've seen pit bulls that if you looked at them and said "boo," they'd run and hide. So it's all in the way they're raised. But I'm going to guess it and say that because of the dog's size, and that everyone was afraid of the dog and didn't
Right.
want to have anything to do with it. And especially if you've seen the person that hung his owner, and that would, dogs remember things,
Right, right. Oh, and then circle back to the previous question about why wasn't the proper investigation done on the peddler and the trial. I remember what the question was now. So, why do you think, in this particular case, the dog is doing the haunting instead of, say, the ghost of the person who was hung, the peddler who was hung? What made the ghost of the peddler rest versus the dog?
Hmm. Good question. I'm both of the deaths were tragic, and being hung, hanging an innocent person and shooting an innocent dog.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've read and paranormal stuff. The more violent the death, the more likelihood there will be something, some kind of paranormal activity.
Right, kind of like the more violent the death, the more negative energy
Exactly.
lingers around.
Exactly. And maybe that's it. I mean, getting hung, that's relatively quick. Snap your neck and that's it. But being shot, you don't know how long that dog laid there before he finally died. You don't know what he was feeling. You know it was pain.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like some of the Civil War battlefields, and that have paranormal activity. They got, look how everyone died there.
Right.
And that's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. And basically, I mean, honestly, I didn't really have much on it except for like we were talking about a minute ago, the energy, the negative energy, how long that energy lingers, depending on, I guess, I'm not like really well versed in all that psychic energy stuff, so I can't really tell you much about that.
Right.
And then, as far as the dog's name, Happy Dog, Hideous Grin, or Sinister Smile? What do you think?
I'll take Sinister Smile for 200, Alex.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. Sinister Smile all the way.
Hmm.
That was just a little, question there. So, did you have any other questions that you wanted to talk about while we're still in this part of the show, or?
Well, the thing that I'm wondering, and it kind of circles back to why didn't they take, why nobody took care of the dog. Maybe this dog is just trying to find someone to take care of him.
By chasing them off and running.
Well, not really saying per se chasing them off, but just trying to get attention. My dogs they chase me, and just for attention.
Right.
And I've maybe that's it. And the hideous grin, like when he jumped up on the horse with the good doc there, and he said he had a hideous grin. Maybe he was happy that he finally caught somebody to maybe give him some attention.
And
Because didn't it say in the story that he hadn't been fed
right.
or so? I mean,
He just the story said that he just laid there while the peddler was in jail, waiting his trial and waiting his hanging, and then the dog actually laid there and witnessed the whole deal. So, who knows how long he laid there, how many days it took to get the trial over with and the hanging, and then he just laid there protecting his territory, so to speak, protecting the where the man died. He was just laid there till the dog eventually died. And there were different versions of the story. One version I read said that the dog just lay there till he starved to death. The other one said, the one that I talked about earlier, said that the townsfolk got tired of hearing the noise and shot the dog. And then even the third version I read said that they stoned the dog to death. So, it was history. Who actually knows? Who knows if it even happened? So.
And well, on that note, a legend and folklore has to start somewhere.
Exactly.
So, it very well could have happened, but the dog chasing everybody and the sightings could be fog.
Right.
But how do you explain the dog jumping up on the girl's hood of her truck?
Right. could be, that area is now well known for that. It could just be people's imagination running away with them too.
Yeah, this is true too. But all in all, maybe this dog was just looking for a milk bone and a pat on the head, and
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you never know.
Right. Exactly.
Which makes me wonder if anyone ever tried to talk to it. I know it sounds crazy, but did they try to talk to it like I talk to my dogs?
Right.
It just kind of makes me wonder.
Right. And we were discussing a question in show prep, and we decided to leave it out because I couldn't find anything. You had mentioned, were there any missing persons cases in that area that were unsolved? And I couldn't find any data on that as far as anything that was related directly to the legend. So, what do you think?
I tried to find it also, and I went from 1960 till present because I figured that right about then's when they would start doing having missing person reports, things like that. And I couldn't find anything either. But yeah,
and the only missing persons cases that were unsolved that I found in that area, they all said last located in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I mean, that's the last place these people were seen. So I don't know if we're just not digging in the right place for these records or what. But
yeah. If anyone out there knows where we could dig to find these things, let us know. Or
even some more information, updated information on the legend as well. Just email us. The email address is going to be at the end of the show. Just email us and give us an update on it if you have any more information.
Yeah, that would be great.
And so our reference material was gathered from articles posted on the following web sources: onlyinyourstate.com, an article by Robin Jarvis, and then columbiametro.com, an article by James Everett Kibler Jr., and then third source was mysteriousuniverse.org, an article by Brent Swancer, Swancer, Swancer. So our final thoughts for the episode. My final thoughts are whether or not this canine specter is real or just local folklore has yet to be seen. In my opinion, there's just not enough substantiated evidence to prove it is real. Jay, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I'll go along with you, but in the same respect, like I said earlier, that legends and folklore has to have a starting place, or they wouldn't be there. So, who knows without going and seeing for ourselves.
Exactly. Don't forget to tune into the next episode of Carolina Creepers and Oddities Radio, where we will discuss the legend of the Cherokee Devil. We thank you again for listening to the show. You've been listening to Carolina Creepers and Oddities Radio. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. If you like our show, please help us out by providing a review. If you would like to contact us, please email us at firefighter274@outlook.com. Until next time, remember, fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. If you stare at the dark too long, you will eventually see what isn't there.